Welcome back to my garden. Firstly, my apologies for missing the talk last week. We've had fantastic rain, day in, day out, non-stop, and just getting in the garden and making a film was impossible. Still, if that's the only price we had to pay for the rain, we're very, very fortunate. And actually, we welcome it. You know, the trees are looking spectacular. And seem to have shot up, rather like small children, that you haven't seen for a while. Other parts of Brazil, not so fortunate, mudslides and the rest. But, it's news, but it's not new. Anyway, I thought I'd get back to what I was going to talk about last week, which seems just as relevant as ever, perhaps more so given that I missed a talk. Anyway, let me begin at the beginning, with a little story. Some years ago, when I was still living in Sao Paulo and I was the pastoral team leader, I found myself on a Friday afternoon wandering off from the head of year office with none other than my good friend, the head of sixth form, Helen Devine. Fantastic lady. Absolute dynamo, brilliant head of year, also a qualified football referee and a die-hard Wigan fan. So, great girl. And we were talking about work and this and that and the rest of it. And for some reason I got onto the subject of my time management system. Now, I can already hear you sniggering because, of course, back in the day at St. Paul's, I was a world famous champion procrastinator. So I explained my theory. My theory was this, that you basically left absolutely everything to the last minute. And Helen suggested that wasn't really time management, more time mismanagement. I said, no, hear me out. So you leave everything for the very last second. And when you start seeing the stuff piling up, you can basically put it into three categories. The first category are things that really have to be done then and there. I mean, this might have been what provoked the story, because one Friday a year, I would find myself working really late with the sole purpose of doing a job that had been waiting for me for 3 months, which was to bundle up the IB coursework so that it could be mailed the next day. And I left it till the very, very last minute. There were other kinds of last minute jobs, and this category too, where you have a really serious deadline, but it's what I would call a fake deadline. It was an internal deadline by someone who gave you a deadline to make sure the job was going to get done. And it needed to be done. It was an important job. But that sort of deadline, first of all, had been made with the full knowledge that many of the teachers were probably like me and would leave things to the last minute, or something might happen. They could be sick. So there was some kind of margin of error built into the deadline. And when you missed the deadline, the teacher in question, or was very, very close to the edge, the teacher in question, in charge, responsible, would ask you how it's coming along, and I'd fumble an excuse, and as I became slightly more senior within the school, I'd just admit that I hadn't done it, but I'd do it straight away, and I would, and it would get done. But then there was a third category of task, which I simply never got around to doing. They'd just hang about on the desk and eventually disappear. A lot of emails that you had to answer fell into that category. Well, and this was my point to Helen. If you didn't answer and then nothing happened, well, you never really needed to do anything in the first place. So doing things at the very last minute, where you did what required urgent and immediate attention for some vital external reason first, what was important but maybe had a margin of error second, and leaving the other stuff to just simply disappear on its own accord, of its own accord. Well, that's sufficient because you eliminated probably 2/3 or even more of the tasks that theoretically busy people were doing. And she tut-tutted and laughed, and then we got to the bar and had a beer, and that was the end of that. It turns out years later, I discovered that there are actually very serious management theorists who suggest the same kind of thing. That it makes sense what I'm saying. Perhaps I took it to extremes, and of course I was very irresponsible. I did leave things to the last minute. I was a bit of an inconvenient nuisance, probably a loose cannon to some of the people who were trying to manage my wayward behaviour, but it had a kind of efficiency. Now, what's that got to do with anything? Well, a couple of weeks ago, I got an email from Oliver Burkeman, and he was talking about an interesting idea. And the idea is this, that we feel under pressure to make things habits, to become better people in essence by starting to do the right thing by way of habit. And I've certainly done that with my sculpture here. Trying to create a daily work habit is a jolly good thing. But Oliver Burkeman's point, slightly tongue-in-cheek, slightly from the perspective of someone who revels in being contrarian, was that actually this is a prime cause, these theories, for procrastination. How? Well, you realize that there's something that you do need to do, and you need to do it regularly all the time. So what's the first thing? Well, you sit down, you read up on possible systems of time management, you carefully plan something out, you schedule it, you think about how you're going to make yourself artificially accountable, you prepare charts and whatnot. Then you think, well, I need to just reflect on all of this, and off you pop to the pub for a pint. You don't actually get anything done. And I've fallen into that trap so many times. And perhaps you have too. I think it's a common story for many of us, to greater or lesser degrees. Not everyone will succumb involving a pint at the pub, but, to each their own. Oliver's point is that this kind of planning, this kind of serial systemizing, we do feeling that we're kind of getting something done, but we're not doing the thing. And he admits and kind of in the email adds a little bit of balance. Of course, building a set of really good habits is the cornerstone of a productive life. But actually, at that moment that you feel something urgently needs to become, not just be ticked off on a list, but become part of your daily practice, the thing to do is just do it. Do it in as small a way as possible, the sort of B.J. Fogg tiny habit, but without thinking of it as a system. Just say, you've got a pile of pile of books to mark. Just say, well, I'll mark one. This is my approach with dishwashing. Admittedly, I now have a system where I kind of set myself a limit. I have to wash at least 10 dishes. And when I've washed the 10 dishes, I can do whatever the hell I like. And very often you start washing the dishes, and lo and behold, before you know it, you've actually done 10, then 12, then 15, then you might as well just finish them all. And at the end of the letter, Oliver Berkman makes a very good point that, of course, creating a life habit, something that is a sort of core activity essential to you being you, begins by doing it once, and in fact might begin by doing it once right now. And I never thought that way when I was confronted with the onerous bureaucratic tasks that plague school teachers everywhere. I mean, years before that, when I was coming to leave Peru and I was finally tidying out a cupboard that was full of boxes that had been moved more than once, I opened it to discover all the past paper practice that the students from my very first class had done, and I had simply not marked. And I know I should have, and it would have made a difference, regular, immediate, good quality feedback. But actually, life went on, and those students have remained on very good terms with me ever since then. I don't think it really bothered them that they never got them back. Admittedly, it was a sort of collection, motley crew of people that probably wouldn't have been too bothered. And the fact was, they'd learnt stuff by doing the past paper practice, and they'd ask me questions to help them get started. So they'd kind of done the work. And I'm looking at that at the moment. You know, the last 8 years, I've been an inveterate researcher and theorizer of how to lead a more productive, efficient, effective, meaningful, purposeful life. But obviously, the key to the fact that I think I have made progress in a lot of these areas is that I started doing things. And where I have put systems in place, the systems have worked where they are very small and unobtrusive. Are sort of little bits of scaffolding that help get the job done, and no more. So there we have it. Last week I missed a video, and now that it's become really a weekly thing that I do, not exactly on a time, on a specific day of the week, but I do it every week, and last week felt strange because I didn't. And I did follow some of those expert habit formers' advice, which is you're allowed to slip up once, but twice in a row is the start of a bad habit. And bad habits tend to begin not by doing something a lot and breaking through some sort of pain barrier, but bad habits begin by not doing something, and then not doing it again. And then, before you know it, well, it's just how things roll. And that's kind of what's become of my blog writing about my chess. Note to self, get back onto that. But it's not the most urgent thing at the moment, so if I do, I do, and if I don't, so be it. And that's it, folks. I'm back on track. I made a film. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know. Leave some comments. Otherwise, I trust your lives are filled with joy. And until next week, from a sunny or gloriously rainy corner of Brazil,